Sorry it was so long, and I know that you've heard a lot of this information before in the past, but so many people never have. And I had to try and lay this thing out. I didn't want it to take that long, but to lay this out, the reasonings. Yes, sir. Okay, so the whole context of Daniel chapter 11 is found in Daniel chapter 8. So in Daniel chapter 8, and I'm trying to, do the best I can here. In Daniel chapter 8, okay, if you want to go there, and friends, listen, I'm glad that he's bringing this up because this is really important to understand, okay? In Daniel chapter 8, we see that there's this beast, and it's in verse 4, okay? It says, "And I saw a ram pushing westward and northward and southward," okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put this little emblem up here, and this is north, this is south, east, and west. Okay? Now, when we're talking about this story that the Bible is sharing us with this, we're not going to talk about the land of Oz or Australia or South America or any stuff like that, right? Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about what the Bible talks about. Okay? We're going to talk about the area that the Bible is referencing here. So you have this power. And it says in verse 4, it says, "I saw the ram pushing westward, northward, and eastward." So if you have something that's pushing westward, and we look at our little compass right here, right? Which way is west? That's this way, right? So this is the west. In fact, in society today, anything east of the Middle East, anything west of the Middle East is considered what? The West, right? Western thought, Western dress, okay? So what happens is, if it's pushing to the west and to the north and to the south, what direction is it coming from? It's coming from the east, right? Okay, so whatever this power is, it's doing this. It's going to the north, it's going to the west, and it's going to the south, okay? Now, what's interesting is, in the previous chapter, there's a beast, it's a bear, and it's deformed, it's higher on one side than the other, and it has 3 ribs in its mouth, right? And those ribs are the 3 kingdoms that it overthrows, okay? And Scripture tells us that kingdom is who? Persia, Medo-Persia, okay? So this is the Medo-Persia Empire. And we'll find out that this is true in the context here. Okay? In fact, do you see where it says, what is this thing called? A ram, right? The Bible calls this a ram. Okay? And do you know that in chapter 8 it tells us, the Lord gives us, we don't even have to guess at this, what this ram is? Hold your finger here and look at verse 20. The Bible says, "The ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia." Can I get an amen? So we don't even have to guess. There's no guesswork needed. We know this is Medo-Persia, and this area right here, geographically in the Middle East, that I'm highlighting right here, is the Medo-Persian Empire. So this is the territory. We're not dealing with woulda, shoulda, coulda, I think I might. We're dealing with reality here. This is real, okay? Now what happens here, when we go back over here to verse 4 and now look at verse 5, it says, as I was considering, behold, the he-goat came from the west. So now you have a he-goat, and which way is he coming from? He's coming from the west. So he's representing the west. On the face of the whole earth. So he's going everywhere. And touch not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And we found out that a horn represented what? A king. So this kingdom, represented by this beast, has a notable king. And you know what notable means? Extremely famous. Famous king. A notable king. And what happens in verse 6? And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in fury and power, and his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. So guess what happens? This ram controls this area, right? This ram. When it comes from the east and it goes to the north and the west and the south, what happens is all this region becomes part of the Medo-Persian Empire. And what happens is when this dude right here, this king, when he comes from the west, he does away with this empire. And you know what he does? He takes it all over. This is all his now. So what you have is this whole region right here is all his. Every compass point. North, east, west, and south. It's all his. Huh? Well, no, hold on a second. This is a geographic region. And this notable king, you want to know who he is? Let's see who he is. Verse 21, we're jumping ahead. Who's the he-goat? Verse 21, the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. This first king is so notable that he builds an empire, and his name is Alexander the Great. Perhaps one of the greatest general kings ever known. Okay? Very notable. He's the king of Grecia. He controls now this whole area. So here's the deal. Here's the deal in this story. Okay? There's a sea here. This is the east. This is the south. This is the north. And this is the west. From here on out, whatever kingdom controls these areas becomes the king of that area. Because notice what happens here. Look here in verse 8, talking about the he-goat. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and his name was Alexander the Great. And when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones towards the 4 winds. This is where we talk about Alexander's empire eventually being divided up because he didn't leave any heirs to his 4 generals, and they divided the pie. Just think of this as a slice of pie here. So here's the slice of pie. Okay? So here's the deal. Alexander makes the pie. Here's the pie. Alexander's pie. He dies. And there's 4 people left in the room. And they say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to slice up Alexander's pie. You get a piece, you get a piece, you get a piece, you get a piece, right? But here's what happens. eventually what happens is that these guys, they wanted all the pie. They didn't want to share the pie. They all wanted to be like Alexander. They wanted to fulfill his dream. So you know what they do? They fight. Before anybody can eat the pie, they fight over the pie. And eventually what happens is they divide the pie into two pieces, the south and the north. And so Daniel 11, when you go to Daniel chapter 11 now, let's pick up the story again. Daniel chapter 11, we talked about the goat being Alexander, the Grecian Empire, the horn being Alexander. And here Gabriel is telling Daniel, now will I show thee the truth, which means we learned earlier, that's the true interpretation. Behold, there shall stand up 3 kings in Persia, and the fourth shall be far richer than they all. And by his strength and through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. This is where Alexander comes in. And a mighty king, that's Alexander, shall stand up and shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, divided into those pies, and shall be divided towards the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, because he didn't have any children, nor according to his dominion, which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up even for others besides those. And the king of the south shall be strong. So one of Alexander's generals was named Ptolemy, right? And Ptolemy, he wanted the whole thing. And it's calling him the king of the south. Verse 5, the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him and have dominion, and his dominion shall be a great dominion. And in the end of years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. Friends, you know what this is? They're trying to make a deal with each other by marrying the king of the daughter to the king of the south to the king of the north. They're going to enter into a league together. This is where the king of the north and king of the south comes from. The whole thing has to do with the geographic area. You understand what I'm saying? In other words, what identifies the king of the north and the king of the south is the geography. It's self-evident. It's the breakup of Alexander's empire. Whatever power controls this area known as the north of Alexander's empire is the king of the north, and whoever controls the southern area of Alexander's empire is the king of the south. And so when it comes to the end of the world and we come to 1798 and you have the king of the north and the king of the south, all we have to do is look at who is ruling the dominion of that geographic location. That tells us who the king of the north is, and who's ruling the south, that's the king of the south. It's very simple. We're to take the Bible just as it reads. Yes, and the Bible and Miller's rules say if you can form your opinion without a contradiction, you can't be in error. So what happens is with the papacy, okay, where's Italy here? Where's the papacy located? Is that in the north? It's in the west. So what happens is we have to do mental gymnastics. We have to wrestle the scriptures to make the papacy the king of the north. Did Babylon come out of the north? Absolutely. But Babylon was destroyed a long time ago. The only way to make the king of the north is to spiritualize it. You have to say the king of the north is a figure, even though that term doesn't do harm to nature. Then you have to say the king of the north represents Babylon. And then you have to say Babylon represents the papacy. That is a violation of the rules. And it does harm to the text in that it is not in the north. It's hard for people because they've all been taught. I know. I once held the position that the papacy was the king of the north. I was once brandishing the hellish torch of Satan, the torch of false prophecy. Yes. If they can use Miller's rules, I welcome anybody. If they can come up to this board and show that the papacy is the king of the north using Miller's rules, I'd love to see it. I understand. I mean, look, if you would have talked to me about this 5 or 6 years ago, I would have told you just the opposite of what I'm telling you right now. Not that I was one of the finest people you knew back then, but I was still wrong. You can be so nice and still be wrong. It's not, yes. Well, I'll give you the quote. Haskell says, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, while the world watches Turkey, let us be watching the movements of our high priest in the heavenly sanctuary. In other words, what happens is, let's go back to the Bible. This is very simple. Very simple, because Mrs. White tells us that Smith's book is the truth for this time. That's a pretty powerful statement, okay? And I know your friend is a very lovely person, I'm sure, but we have to make a determination. Are we going to go to the law and to the testimony, or are we going to go by nice people? The law and the testimonies state that the Eastern question is truth, and that the book Daniel and the Revelation is the truth for this time. Now, he says in his book, in verse 45, is the only thing yet to be fulfilled. And I was able to show in this text right here, in verse 40, let's look there together. At the time of the end, there's a war. That time of the end is 1798. And the victor in this war is the king of the north. So from verse 40 all the way to verse 45, the king of the north is now the subject, right? To the victor goes the spoils. You understand what I'm saying? So what happens is the whole saga that's taking place here in Daniel chapter 11 is this region. This is the main focal point. Okay, other people are coming in like France and all this kind of thing, but they're coming into the field of view, which is this geographic location that identifies what is north, south, and east. Okay? So what happens here, since verse 40, we've been able to handily show that the only historical war that takes place in 1798 involving the king of the north and the king of the south is the Turk, the Egyptians, and France. Okay? That war happens in 1798. And what happens is this power goes all the way down to verse 45. And when you go to verse 45, it says here, because remember, this whole chapter, I'll get to you in a minute, this whole chapter is literally to be understood. This is what the angel says. I'm here to give you the truth. I'm here to give you the literal interpretation. And here's what it says in verse 45. The only thing that is yet to be fulfilled, it says, and he, who's he? The king of the north. And who's the king of the north? Anybody that occupies the northern territory of Alexander's empire shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. And what are these seas right here? Well, this is a sea right here, the Mediterranean. Here is Jerusalem, the glorious holy mountain of God. You can do a word search in the Bible, and you'll see that the glorious holy mountain is in fact Jerusalem. It's got a sea to the east. It's got a sea to the south. It's got a sea to the west, sea to the south, sea to the east. It's between the seas, okay, geographically. The king of the north is going to go, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a sea on the western side of Jerusalem. There's a sea on the southern side, and there's a sea on the eastern side. And Jerusalem is in the middle. It's between the seas, literally. We're to understand this literally. So the king of the north is going to go to Jerusalem, and he's going to set himself up there, and yet he shall come to his end, and no one's going to help him. He's going down. He's going down for the count, and he ain't getting back up. And when he goes down, guess what? This is why Haskell says, when we look at what's happening with Turkey, we need to keep focused on the heavenly sanctuary, because look at what happens next. Verse 1 of Daniel chapter 12. And at that time, at what time? At the time that the king of the north comes to his end at Jerusalem, at that time shall Michael stand up. Remember, judgment was set. And when Michael stands up, judgment is over. Hold on. Let me finish for him. The great prince which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such was never was there since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. It's all over. It's done. And so the last historical event that takes place is this power right here. Comes to his end at Jerusalem. And that's the key event. So what we're supposed to be doing, if we were doing what they did in Ellen White's day, when they were having these big meetings and people were dumping out their ships and trains, dumping out their living cargo on the ground by the thousands, what were they coming to hear? The Eastern question. They want to know, what is the event that leads to the close of human probation? And we have that information, friends. And right now, the middle of the East is embroiled in a war. And Turkey is making its move. Just go online and do the research. It's saying, we are going to Jerusalem and we're going to establish ourselves there. We're going to have a caliphate and we're going to bring the Ottoman Empire back. And according to prophecy, they're going to come to their end. And we need to be showing people, hey, this is almost getting ready to be fulfilled, which means probation is about to close. Rich, listen, I didn't come up with this study. This is not a teaching that I invented. This is from the pioneers. It's in our books. Technically, it's the only official position ever endorsed by the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Okay? It's never been rescinded. And we have an endorsement from the prophet says it's truth. There's... I like those. Yeah, I can. Absolutely. And so it's I don't have I don't have anything to prove by this. The only thing I'm trying to share is that the very last deception of Satan is to make of none effect the writings of Mrs. White. And when Mrs. White says, this is truth, this is the book that you need to read, and these people are saying, that isn't truth, and we shouldn't read that book, now we're at variance with the prophet, and we can know that the very last deception of Satan is being put on us. And Daniel 11 verse 45 has almost been fulfilled. That means where are we in time? At the very end. That's it. The prophet has spoken, and I'm not the prophet. And I'm not the son of a prophet. That's it. What can we do? Okay. Thank you to everybody. Now, I have one request of you. See that little doorway over there? That's where the chairs go. If everybody can pick up their chair.